Please. And remember, as I say, we're presenting tomorrow, so you can be.
I'll press this now. I've got the technology. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Just to remind everyone that we do have the governance workshop tomorrow. So some of the topics that we'll be covering today, we will actually be able to go into much more detail tomorrow. So I'd suggest that if, with your agreement, clearly not wanting to curtail questions, but there will be an opportunity to go into much more detail. I'm thinking particularly around the Waikato District Council contract, where we do have an extensive presentation on that tomorrow. Okay, Chair, before we start, just to acknowledge obviously the events in Christchurch, and I'll ask Raveen to talk a little bit about what Watercare has done. Raveen advised me over the weekend that a former employee was one of those who lost their lives in Christchurch. So Raveen and the team have done a sterling job at looking after the staff and making sure that people feel supported, but he can go into that in a little bit more detail. And my other opening comment is the new reporting template has gone down really well with the team. We thought it's really helped to focus in on the key items as opposed to a lot of information in detail. Fair to say that there's probably, to use Raveen's words, a little bit of a couple of teething problems with it, but I think those are minor problems as opposed to overall it's really going in the right direction, and that's fantastic. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Raveen to run through a couple of slides, but as I say, with the context tomorrow.
Thanks, Margaret. So on the Christchurch, as Margaret said, on Friday, obviously staff were already leaving by the time we realised what had happened and how severe and surreal it was. But over the weekend, what we did is we reinforced the vigilance at all our operating sites and also at all our construction sites. And then during the weekend, we prepared for staff coming back on Monday. And when they did come back, we had black ribbons for them to put on. We have prepared some sympathy cards to send to the two mosques and to our ex-staff member that they could write their notes. And a lot of them, because they were emotional, it gave them a relief as they wrote their messages. We've also got cards to send to all the first responders, the hospital, the police. So we'll collect all that, and actually one of my executives will physically go down to Christchurch, and she will meet the wife and the two daughters of our ex-employee, and we're also collecting some money, so we'll do that. But we are doing what everyone else is doing, and we've been in contact with council and civil defence who have been coordinating, so it's been working very well. On the format, the one thing I just want to bring to your attention that the current format has got a net direct expenditure as a line. Now we can't change that because that's in the template. But for Watercare, it's net direct revenue. So we are revenue positive. So the 210 million is actually positive. It's not negative. So I thought I'll just raise that. And we're talking to the officers at council so that in future we can change the template. So that's an example of the tweaking that we would like. So in terms of the highlights, on the slide we've got a few items there, but I just want to highlight the fact that we have put a lot of effort into the health part of health and safety. So safety has been a big focus for Watercare. Health has been the poor cousin. And to make sure that we can do health better, we've also introduced welfare. And with Friday's event, it just shows how important it is for us as an employer to look at health and welfare and wellness as well as safety. On that page, I'm not going to cover anything else because I'm going to flick through these very quickly and then allow you to ask us questions. In terms of financials, we are ahead of budget, but we are also unfavorable in terms of our maintenance. So because we're selling more water, the demand has been very high, and I'll give you some indication in the next slide. The cost of operating the business has been higher because we have to pump the additional demand from Waikato, which has got a higher cost of treatment. Our unplanned maintenance has also been very high. So usually what happens with the storm events we had until Christmas, we had a lot of wastewater jobs because of the rain events. And then after that, with the dry season that we've had lots of water main breaks. And usually as the ground dries and shrinks, we get the pipes breaking. And even where there are existing leakages, when the ground is dry, they manifest themselves more. And so we are getting 5 times the normal number of fault calls in our call center. But overall, we are addressing the demand that we are facing quite well. And the good thing about the high demand is our revenue is higher than budget. So Marlon is quite happy. In terms of SOI indicators, we are doing well on almost all of the SOI indicators. So I'm going to focus on the ones where we are not. So the three that we are really struggling on, one, of course, is the wet weather overflows. And we've got a chart on the side to just indicate to you that the rainfall we got, which was more spread out during December 2018, wasn't all that far different from the rainfall we had in March 2017, which was the Tasman Tempest, except that the Tasman Tempest was concentrated over a weekend. So we've been having a lot of rain events, which now is followed by a very dry period, as I've said earlier. So we haven't been meeting our wet weather overflow target, which is in the SOI. Our drinking water demand is also higher than where we would like it. One, because the demand has gone up because of the very hot and dry summer we've had. Two, because the neighboring non-metropolitan communities of Auckland and outside of Auckland have come into our metropolitan system and taken tanker water for their use. So we've been supplying a larger population than we would otherwise be supplying. But of course, when we calculate our average consumption, we just take the population of Auckland in the numbers. And then our losses are high as well, which we are focusing a lot, that the board has put us under the microscope in terms of our unplanned and planned maintenance and our water demand and the real losses or the non-revenue water. But on the losses, we've also found that we're losing quite a bit of our water through theft. So we've actually identified some of our developers and builders who have been taking water using hydrants, but the hydrants are not metered. So we have an education program that we'll be working on soon. We're working with the fire and emergency services to try and adopt a hydrant program with the community so that they understand that when the hydrants are illegally used by others, not only are they stealing our water, they also damage the hydrant because they don't know how to use the hydrant properly. And they also create dirty water complaints that we get. So managing our hydrants will give us multiple benefits. So it's something that we're working with the fire and emergency services, and we'll have something more to report in the coming months. So looking ahead for the next 2 quarters, we're doing a lot of work on climate change, and we'll cover some of this tomorrow at the workshop. And of course, the council's program over the last 2 days and today, we've been part of that. The central government review on water reform has been very quiet. So there hasn't been much additional work done, but we are we're monitoring that, and we will be speaking to yourselves as we get more information. We officially opened our new Warkworth water treatment plant. It's the it's the largest non-metropolitan water treatment plant that we've got, and that was a huge success. The chair was there and the mayor turned up, and the most moving thing for me was that the local iwi have carved a taniwha, which they have dedicated to water care and which is at the entrance, so that the water supply to the community is protected. And that's the first time that Taniwha has been put into a physical form. And that was a very moving moment for everyone present. We feel very privileged with that. And then on the Western Isthmus Water Quality Improvement Project, we've made some headway between ourselves and Healthy Waters with the Herne Bay and St. Mary's Bay Residents Association. They have been very concerned about the slow progress with sewer separation. And we did some on-site investigations over the past 3 months and confirmed all the homes that are physically separated and the ones that aren't. And we've agreed that separation will happen over the next 2 years for St. Mary's Bay. And so I understand that both the resident associations are quite pleased about that. And we'll be working together, Council Watercare, on that. We're also very pleased to say that the tender that we received from Geller Abergeldy for the Central Interceptor was at a price that allowed us to do the Grey Lynn Tunnel, which is the extension to the Central Interceptor, another 2 kilometers of it, within the same budget. So that also contributes to the Western Isthmus program, which is the final item that I've got there. So we have signed the contract. The contractor will start construction at Mangere around May. It is going to be a major, mammoth project for Auckland. It's going to create lots of employment. It is going to build the capacity and capability of the civil engineering capability that we need in New Zealand and in Auckland, and we're very excited about that. So on that, I'll stop and we can take questions.
Are you joined at the hip with Healthy Waters over the St. Mary's Bay work, especially the holding tank or whatever?
So this is the tunnel, the stormwater tunnel that, so yeah. So what we said to Healthy Waters, you know, through Stephen Town, and we had a moderation session with the mayor, is that the original concept that Healthy Waters had was that they would collect all the stormwater, including all the wastewater, store it in this tunnel and pump it back to the water care system. And we said to Healthy Waters that we will not accept the pumped back stormwater. We will not increase the volume of stormwater coming down our system. And there are a number of reasons for that. One, we are out in the community elsewhere in Auckland telling people that they need to take their stormwater out of the wastewater system. We're doing smoke tests and infiltration tests, and it would just be wrong if we allowed a council family member to do exactly what we're telling our residents to stop doing. That's one issue. The second issue is we've got developers who are saying that they have to, and they have said this to us, that they're being asked to put stormwater treatment facilities in new subdivisions. And why is it that Healthy Waters can just put their stormwater into the water care system and say, my problem's solved? Why can't they do the same? So we had good reasons why we are saying we don't want any additional stormwater coming into our wastewater system, which is why we agreed that sewer separation for Herne Bay and St. Mary's Bay will progress with urgency. The tunnel that stormwater, Healthy Waters need, our position has been if Auckland Council's Healthy Waters need the tunnel for stormwater, then that's what they need. And we're not in a position to say whether or not they should have the stormwater tunnel. That's a decision of Healthy Waters and Council for water care.
And Chair, if I may add that we discussed this matter at the board around, you know, making sure that the decisions we're making are for the long-term benefit. So let's not try and find a quick fix for something whilst then creating a problem for the future. And certainly, as Raveen's described, why would we be spending all this money on a central interceptor to actually alleviate problems and then create another one on the other hand?
Possibly remiss of me to have brought that up actually, so I just have to possibly say to, anyway. Councillor Lee, you may want to follow that up.
Thank you very much for another year's excellent performance. Just picking up on Chair Clow's questions and Mr. Jadaran's response and yours, Madam Chair. Given this is likely to cost at least 45 million, this tunnel, and then discharge into the harbour, would it be possible for Watercare to work with Auckland Council to come up with something more affordable, more sustainable, to resolve the stormwater issues in West Haven, St Mary's Bay, Herne Bay? I understand your position, and I agree with it. Most people would, but we still have this project on our books, and as you know, once these things get momentum, they seem to have their own kind of inertia. So, would it be possible for a technical solution or critique to come up with perhaps something better and less expensive than, I'm sure this council can spend $45 million elsewhere where it's actually wanted, rather than this funny tunnel in St Mary's Bay, which is now just for stormwater. Is any way you could, Watercare could assist if requested?
I think I'll start by saying that my comment to the mayor and to Stephen Town was that if between Watercare and council we're spending over $70 million to improve the receiving waters in the community that will benefit is objecting to it, then something is not right. They're generally, when councils spend money, if it isn't a NIMBY issue, the communities are usually excited about money being spent in their neighborhood to improve their neighborhood. So that would be my comment. I think it would be unfair for me to say that we have expertise in stormwater, which we don't. We do have expertise in applying good judgment. One of the things that we have mentioned previously, and this is not out of order, but I have said some time ago that the combined sewerage area that Auckland Council and Watercare have to deal with impacts on Watercare. And so it would be better if we had some sort of an arrangement between Watercare and Council that Watercare managed the entire program of stormwater and wastewater in the combined sewer area so that we could come up with the most optimum solutions. Now, out of that came the Western Isthmus program. It still requires us to work with Healthy Waters, and when we have two organizations with two different viewpoints, two different styles, you're always going to get some tension. And the tension can be positive or it can be negative. We're trying to make the best out of the tension to be positive about it. But the reality is, if you've got a problem, the best way to solve it is to hold one person accountable, is all I'm going to say.
And Councillor Lee, tomorrow there will be a wider presentation on the Western Isthmus and exactly some of the issues that Ravine has touched on. We'll go into in much more detail.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Spotted you on the left.
Oh, good, because one of my questions was about the Western Isthmus Quality Improvement Programme and the lack of meetings. I haven't been at one for, you go to two, Mike? I don't know when the last one was. So, you know, at least what's happening, who calls them. So, but we'll talk about that tomorrow. My main criticism of this document is the Central Interceptor creep. It's not 2026, it's 2025 it's opening. And I don't know why you've put a year onto it. I've watched for this all the time. It's in there, tell me why you've got an extra year. Because it's got to come back. It's got to come out.
No, it's 2025. I noticed that we've got two numbers in there. In one place we say 2025, in one we say 2026, and it's our problem because we, unfortunately, in some parts of Watercare we talk about financial years, so it's 2026 financial year, but it's 2025 calendar year that will be finished. So it is 2025, and we will fix it. I had noticed that as well. So my apologies.
I think that's all I had. Thank you. I look forward to the discussion tomorrow about climate change because there's a few comments that you made in there about the risks of bringing people on board. I'll be interested to discuss that with you tomorrow.
Councillor Bartley.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to pick up, thank you for your presentation, on the risks that you are associated here where you've got your maintenance costs are increasing. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Absolutely. So it's our unplanned maintenance costs that are increasing. So this is when something fails and we respond. So it's not the planned maintenance. And our unplanned maintenance increase is mostly in the small pipes. So we have big pipes and we have small pipes, the retail pipes. So the retail pipe failures are the ones where we've got most of our cost. So we've got some increase in volume because of the extra rain or the very dry period we've got. But we've also got an increase in cost per response, which we are working with our contractors to identify. And one of the things we have identified is traffic management, which we've mentioned here. So it's something we're talking with Auckland Transport. The traffic management requirements of working on the roads adds a lot of cost to us. So there are some climate change issues, climate impact issues as well, that we could probably talk at the workshop tomorrow. So we have, and we've been covering this over the last 2 days and today as part of the council's climate program. So for example, concrete is a big carbon sink. So every time we pour concrete, you know, we're creating a bigger carbon imprint, and when we're removing concrete. So as an example, if we were replacing a hydrant on Remuera Road, say in Newmarket or Remuera, anywhere along Remuera Road, generally we would just cut the concrete footpath, a square that big, take the hydrant out, put a new one in, and put the concrete around it on the footpath. But now what the requirements are that we have to put traffic management on the road, even though we're not working on the road. Usually we would, because it's an arterial road, we would close one of the lanes, and then we're no longer allowed to cut the concrete around the hydrant. We have to remove the whole concrete slab, which usually is 3 meters wide by 3 meters wide, and replace the whole 9 square meters of concrete. So these things are adding cost to us. So we're actually challenging some of the rules that have been around for a while, but we've just been absorbing the cost, but it's now getting too much because the cost of disposing the concrete that we take out is high. We've also got some regulations. These are not council, these are government regulations, that when we are trenching, for example, the material we take out of the trench is deemed to be contaminated, even though it's not contaminated, and we can't reuse it. We can't put it back in the trench. We have to dispose it and then put new material in. Now that is all adding cost and adding to our carbon footprint. So the timing is perfect for us to start challenging a lot of the current rules and regulations that have been put in place, probably for good reasons, but they were so generic that they are creating cost and wastage for us. So it's been a hot topic at our climate change symposium this week.
And Councillor, I guess taking it back to very fundamentals, the issue the board has raised with management is our unplanned maintenance high because we're not spending enough on our planned maintenance? So are we sweating our assets too hard? And this is a piece of work that Raveen and the team are looking at, and hence why we've already looked at one of those key reasons, particularly around the costs of the unplanned maintenance and ensuring that we do look at delivering that as efficiently as we can, bearing in mind the comments that Raveen has just made.
Thank you. It's very interesting. Thank you.
Member Tuppy.
Good, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly, I just want to congratulate you and acknowledge the leadership showing in the Māori engagement and the way it's all been going down. So it's been getting good reports back myself. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. We know we've got you tomorrow, so there's no more questions, and we've made up a bit of time. Appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you for the presentation, and thank you for the feedback on the reporting template. We have. No, so it's not official business we're doing now, it's just, yeah, business. Hello all. Hello Lester. Hello Wayne. Hello Shane. Okay, all right. And Wally. Well, look, the attendance is declining, Lester, which must mean there's no issues. And yesterday was a big day, and so everyone's exhausted. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Chair. Today we have with us our Deputy Chair, Wayne Donnelly, Shane Ellison, Wally Thomas, and other members of our team. We send our apologies from Mark Lang, our CFO. Unfortunately, he has a family illness and he's out of Auckland today. Shane will take us through the presentation today in Mark's absence, but I'll just make a few introductory remarks, if I may. You'll see a number of references throughout our report about our key strategic priorities of safety, accelerating the modal shift, and particularly to PT, and of course the active modes, walking and cycling. We are making strong progress in all of these areas, and as you're aware, we're currently consulting on the speed limit bylaw, with that consultation due to close on the end of this month, the 31st of March. Personally, I believe that the interventions around safety and road safety in particular are the singular most important thing we will do in the next 12 to 18 months and beyond. I've spent a large part of my career working in the health sector, and I know only too well the pain and grief that is caused by road trauma almost every day, and that is ongoing. And together, I think we, you as our community leaders and AT as your delivery arm, we can and we must do something about this. We do note that at this meeting previously, there was unanimous support for the speed management program and a request for us to, was it a different meeting? Planning meeting, yeah. And a request for us to accelerate our plans, which we are doing. You'll also note in our report commentary about the regional fuel tax. You know, we've said this before, that yourself and this Labour-led government should be congratulated for your courage in introducing this much-needed alternative source of funding. I know it's somewhat controversial, but if it wasn't for that, there would be $4.3 billion not being spent on transport. We're starting to see projects being delivered through the regional fuel tax, and the most significant is the Eastern Busway, part of Amity, which has never been going fast enough and is now speeding up, and for which we recently signed a $100 million contract. While this report only takes us through to the end of the second quarter, December, you can have confidence that the progress we're making across all the strategic areas continues, and we will discuss that today. Thank you, Shane.
Thank you, Lester. Thank you, Chair. If I just pass on that clicker. Thank you. Ahiahi Marie. Before I start, I'd just like to introduce Natasha Whiting. Natasha has joined us in November last year as our new Executive General Manager, Culture and Transformation. Obviously, that's an important priority for us at Auckland Transport. Natasha joins us after a wealth of experience from Spark, from New Zealand Post, and more latterly from DB or Heineken. So we're really pleased to have her join us and also assist us in balancing up some of the gender balance issues we may have had with the exec team. So that's great. So very pleased to have Natasha here.
Well, I feel as though we should have Natasha at the front table to balance that, that gender imbalance. Also, Lester, if you could turn yours off and Shane, turn yours on.
Okay. If I turn to slide 2 of the pack, you'll see some stats and highlights of the key focus areas. I'll just draw your attention to a few of them. You will be aware of the Home Free initiative we took on the last Friday before Christmas, where public transport was free, well, all except the exempt ferry services, I think, were free after 4 p.m. And that was targeted at not just encouraging more public transport use, but more importantly, targeting drink driving on what is the highest risk 12 hours on our network in any 12-month period. That is, the initiative, aside from the great publicity we got, was hugely successful. The numbers we saw as compared with the Friday before Christmas of the previous year were of the order of 3 times higher using our rail network in that period or on that day. So that was a great outcome for us and a great outcome in terms of tackling the risk around drink driving. Also like to, in terms of the operating performance in the top quadrant on the right, just highlight the growth in PT patronage and PT boardings. What I will tell you is that growth has continued and accelerated in the first few months of this year. And in fact, we are seeing really strong growth of about 8.8% year to date to the end of February in terms of boardings on the public transport network. I'll also, you will be pleased to know that March Madness won't have featured much in terms of news over the last couple of weeks. That is because that has gone relatively well. There's been 1 or 2 minor issues on some ferry services, but otherwise, from our perspective, the team who have had lots of experience now with March Madness have dealt with it in a professional way with the operators. Lastly, Lester touched on the EB1 contract. We're looking to have construction start in the next month and a half with delivery by the end of 2020. I'd also, before I move off the slide, like to draw your attention to the NZTA funding at the bottom of the screen, which is at 42% year to date. Yes, there's a 50-50 assumption in the LTP, but what I draw your attention to is a couple of years ago, I think Wayne will recall, that number was around 27%. It's of that sort of order. So we've had a major jump in the contribution of NZTA towards the programs that we're running in Auckland. With Tash here, I just thought we've been sharing some of this information with the local board chairs, and Wally will talk to you about that in a few minutes. But we've been doing, as I said, a lot of work around culture and transformation at AT. In the back half of last year, we did a lot of work which was around diagnostic and due diligence on the organisation. We've got a very, very strong evidence base for understanding our organisation, the behaviours in the organisation now. And as an exec leadership team, I'd like to draw your attention to the bottom right of that slide, and that focuses on the 5 key areas that we're looking to deliver on to deliver outcomes, not in terms of just the environment that our people work in, but in terms of outcomes for our community. So that will, Tash is currently in the process, is fairly well advanced actually, in terms of developing a plan, which will be implemented through the remainder of this year and next year. Road safety, just to give you an update in terms of how the speed limit bylaw consultation is going. You're probably aware that the consultation finishes on the 31st of March. We have been particularly active in this regard, lots of different communications going out, encouraging people to have their say. We have, I don't have a number as of today, but late last week it was around 7,000 submissions. We're expecting that number to continue to climb. Some of the themes that are coming through are up there on the screen, and clearly we're doing quite a bit of work in terms of myth busting, in terms of what the proposal actually involves. Hearings with the board, 2 board members and or a panel which includes 2 board members and others will take place in April, and before the final proposal goes back to the board for consideration and implementation, if approved, in August. Now I'd just like to hand over to Wally. The context for these slides is really in response to some requests from yourselves and others and what's been set out in the letter of expectations around how is AT going to improve its relationships with local boards and others with respect to how it goes about what it does.
Thank you, Shane. Kia ora, councillors, Board Member Taipari. As Shane said, we have a very clear SOI target around local board satisfaction with AT and our engagement. It is set at 65% satisfaction. That's measured through Auckland Council-led elected members survey. Last year we were nudging 50% in that space, so clearly we've got a bit of room to make up. And today what I'll go through are some of the initiatives that we've begun or are about to begin to try and improve that figure and improve our engagement. Excuse me, towards the back end of last year, we also undertook a series of qualitative surveys with 20 of the 21 local boards, their chairs and or transport leads. The one board that didn't take part was Waitakere, and some very clear themes and common themes came through. One of those being that key project staff didn't really understand the role of local boards in a governance sense or in the sense of their role in the community. So we have our project managers undertaking governance training, which is led by Phil Wilson and his team. The first of those starts end of this month, so that they can really understand the accountabilities of local boards and what our responsibilities in terms of facilitating them in delivering on those community expectations are. Likewise, project managers taking part in your council's quality advice program. Again, some of the comments that came through the survey were that our reporting was either high level, too high level, or too detailed. So we need to hit the sweet spot that that really does deliver on what local boards need in that space. We've also introduced a session at our staff induction. So new staff, people who are onboarding with the organisation up front, understand or have the sense of what local boards are here to achieve. 2 local board members, chairs, Tracy Mulholland from the FO and Julie Ferry from Albert Eden will be the first, be among the first to present to staff in those induction sessions. One of the other themes that came through was around responsiveness in terms of elected member requests or requests for service. As some of you may be aware, we're trialling a new system with the Franklin and Papakura local boards. That graph shows how our elected member response rates are tracking, and I'd point out at the bottom right hand of the graph there, the number 10, that represents 10 calendar days, not 10 working days. So the response rate is, I guess, better than if it had just been working days. And for February, that figure sits at 12. Notwithstanding that January is quite a quiet time, February things tend to pop back up. So the initiatives in that space are clearly working. In our new project management framework, we've introduced some mandatory gates before a project can progress, which are around local board engagement on a project. So it's much more than a simple tick box around have you discussed this with the local board. It actually is a formal gate through the project management process. Shane has asked that all executive general managers, those are on the executive team who report to him, rotate through and present strategic issues to local boards at least twice a year. Councillor Casey is a member of the political steering group, the governance steering group, and there's been some discussion around communications protocols with both local boards and councillors, which has been through that group recently. As some of you are aware, on the back end of these presentations to council around OSOI, within a week we make the same presentation to local board members. That's led by Mark Gilbert, one of our board members, Auckland Transport board members. They'll continue. Transport is a standing item on cluster workshops, and of course the Waiheke pilot, which came through the governance workshop, where we're hoping for the successes that we are going to get through that pilot to roll out across the region. That's it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Just for everyone's information, can you explain a little bit to us what's happening at NZTA or not happening, or?
Okay, so it's a pretty critical question, and it's an area of current concern, because we need the whole ecosystem to be fully focused and at the highest level of momentum. And there are changes there that are quite distracting for us and the ecosystem. So Shane will take us through what is the current state of play and the concerns.
So it's, first of all, I'd say it's quite opaque in terms of we're not getting a whole lot of visibility, and the relationships that we had at my level are not what they were previously. We have an interim CEO, and obviously they're dealing with a number of different things. We're trying to manage that as best we can through people like Mark, who's not here today, and things like that. But for your benefit, I think the key issues are business cases and funding requests are not being approved in a timely way. In some 5 instances I can think of that are in a letter that went to NZTA, are holding up projects. That's where we've got to now, and these are critical projects such as Puanui, airport to Puanui. There's one Ollie in particular that is where we're stuck until we can progress on that. Papakura to Pokekawi electrification, again we've got an issue there where we have escalated it, and we've asked it to, not just through AT, we've also I've also had communication with Stephen, for example, and that's been flagged upstream. So that is an issue for us. I think that's one critical issue. The second critical issue I flagged that funding from NZTA had improved significantly from around 27 to 42%. We sense that we are getting the cooperation we can from NZTA. Mark Lang's doing a great job and his team in terms of working with NZTA officers in terms of getting the funding that we can, but we're being told that the NLTF is capped out or is being oversubscribed. And secondly, we're also come to the conclusion that unless there are some different funding mechanisms, we are going to struggle to get to 50-50 on ATAP. That's the current situation as of about the last week. So obviously we're looking to escalate those issues. It may present some challenges in terms of our capital program for next year. If we're unable, that's when it will, it's not this year, it will manifest itself next year.
And Shane, you mentioned it's holding one ollie up. You could perhaps tell us which one it is, but there are 5 ollies, and rumour has it that really hasn't been, anything has happened in 10 months since we settled them. Can you comment on that?
So that's not the case in terms of that. The ollie that I'm talking about is Matiatia.
Okay. Yep.
It's caught in a vicious circle in terms of that one. We do have some challenges on some of the other ollies. Papakura Park and Ride is one of them.
Yep.
And there are 1 or 2 others that we are trying to work through at the moment in terms of progressing.
Okay. So just give you a heads up that the local boards are on the hunt, and it's not just your ollies, it's all 20 of them or however many we've got here. I'm looking at the page. But yeah, they are showing a deep interest in that, especially in election year. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. You probably knew that I'd probably be asking some questions. I've got 2 or 3 questions. First of all, you're aware of 90 Pekeringa Road. I've sent through photos of the fence, and that's right next door to where Amity starts. You know, where the houses have just come down. Just this month alone, and we're in March, just this month they've had 6 cars that have gone through the fence. And you were talking about safety. Now that is something that really needs to be addressed. I know the Howard Local Board has got some budget, the unspent budget, and I'd really like to see that Auckland Transport really pushes to get something to happen, because on my watch, I don't want to be going to somebody's funeral, and it's not just the people that live in that house that's just behind. It's also all the pedestrians. A lot of young children catch the bus, so really concerned about that, and that's something that's probably my number 1 thing at the moment in our community. The other thing that's concerning, we're talking about public transport and the buses. You're probably aware that there were a handful of very young children that were left standing on the road because the bus was too full to take them to school, the school bus. And that's quite a concern, especially in this current climate, with some really undesirable people hanging around, and just lucky that a parent stayed with them and sorted them out. Just going back to that 90 Pekeringa Road, one of the reasons that the accidents are happening is because of people are going through the amber light and the road surface isn't up to scratch. It needs to be looked at. It's a real concern. There's the residents of the property at 90 Pekeringa Road have probably had 20 or maybe even 30 crashes in the last few years, and already just for the month of March they've had 6. So something has to happen there. And I know we've got community facilities. Are going to be talking a little bit later on. I know Auckland Transport's going to be handing over the berm mowing to community facilities, and I'm just hoping that Auckland Transport hands it over, looking as good as it should be. I think there's a bit of improvement that needs to happen. I'm just trying to help the community facilities while I'm here. And so I think you've heard some of my requests and you know, really something is going to happen. And I mean, if we don't do something about that 90 Pekeringa Road, it could be tomorrow that we're attending a funeral and it'll be on our watch. So I really do want something to happen at 90 Pekeringa Road. The other thing is where the Amity, all the houses have come down, just behind the beautiful fence line, just in front of the pedestrian crossing, just behind the fence, there's all these big concrete blocks, which the people of 90 Pekeringa Road, they would love to have those concrete blocks just to protect their homes, because about 4 weeks ago, a car just about went right through their kitchen window. So you have to actually go out there and have a look, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. But I was told that they couldn't use the concrete blocks, and the concrete blocks are just sitting there protecting vacant sections, and here we've got people's lives at risk. And where they've put the concrete blocks, there's never ever been in all the 20 or 30 odd years that I've travelled up and down that road, I've never ever seen a car go through that part of Pekeringa Road. It's always gone through this particular patch. So it's a safety issue. It's got to be high on the list. Something has to be done tomorrow. Thank you.
We'll follow. I'll follow up and see where the 90 Pekeringa Road is up to, and I know that a response is due. I've seen some of the response that's been composed about the loading on those services, so you can expect a response in the next few days.
I was just a little bit disappointed at the February local board workshop. They were supposed to discuss this issue, and it wasn't discussed, and I don't know why, but anyway, the people that live at 90 Pekeringa Road, they really, really are very concerned, and they're just having a lot of sleepless nights and having to take medication, and it's just not on. Thank you.
Councillor Casey.
I've got a couple of things. One's in your report and one isn't. The one that's in your report is TravelWise. I think TravelWise is one of the best things you do for children. My problem is that we used to give you a target of increasing the number of schools every year, and in your current target for the year it's 250 schools, and I want to know how are you increasing the number of schools, or is that static? Because if it's static, I'm not terribly happy about that, and there's no way of telling from the target.
Good afternoon, councillors. Councillor Casey, Randy Akama. Look, the idea is to absolutely increase the numbers as we go year by year. What we found in previous years is, we need to collaborate with the schools, and there's a lot of effort that's required from the various schools in terms of the effort that they put into the TravelWise programs with us as well. We have a team of dedicated TravelWise planners that actually go out to schools as well. So we've got a bit of a program where we actually do target them. The idea is to increase them, but the rate at which we do increase them is dependent very much on the resourcing that schools have to be able to work with us on the program.
Understand that. So how can I know if you've increased in that quarter, if a school is added or not? I can't. How are you able to tell me that?
Yeah, so we do keep a good track of the schools that we actually are providing support to. We just need to be able to report that. I'm unable to answer right now in terms of where and how we do reports, but we absolutely do keep track of it.
Okay, the other thing I'm interested in is the number of schools in Auckland and what percentage of that is the 250, like how many are still outside, and what we're doing about closing the gap so that every school's got a TravelWise programme. Have you got a timeline on that? You don't have to answer that. That's the kind of question I'd like to talk to you about.
Yeah, I'll note that. Thank you.
The second one is not in your report, but definitely came in November, and that's the scooters, the e-scooters. And the reason I'm raising it is yesterday I spent the morning with the Disability Advisory Panel, who have some real concerns about e-scooters being on the footpath, especially if you have a mobility issue, or you can't see them coming, or you can't hear them coming. And they wanted to raise the issue of consultation with that particular community and who's in charge of I don't know, everything I know about e-scooters I've read about in the Herald, to be honest. The occasional email from, from our senior staff, but it's one of those, remember the no surprises? This was a big surprise. So I think they're great, but there are issues of safety, and I wonder who's doing the trial.
Councillor Casey, to us frame up who's responsible, how that responsibility can be exercised. Shane.
So the response, there's a very, very long answer to this, and there's a, okay. So the responsibility for vehicles on the road network, vehicles being bicycles, cars, scooters, the specification of what can travel where on our roads, whether it's compliant or not, sits with the Transport Agency and central government. Okay. Our responsibility and where we get involved is because somebody like a Lime, as with a fruit seller or some other traders, wants to trade on the road reserve. That is how it came to council and to Auckland Transport. The bylaw, street trading bylaw, has been delegated to Auckland Council to issue those bylaws on our behalf. Thankfully, because of our relationship with Auckland Council, the team have been working together on how that happens. We have effectively, NZTA have approved the use of these e-scooters, or the Lime e-scooters, but not just Lime e-scooters, all e-scooters, on the road reserve, okay, which includes the footpath, in Auckland and other locations across New Zealand. We are using the street trading bylaw as the means for, in the case of Lime, so this is just Lime, all other public users who have, or private individuals who own e-scooters, are not subject to any regulation by Auckland Council or Auckland Transport. Okay, we are just, because Lime want to trade off the footpath or off the road, that is our means by which Auckland Council and Auckland Transport are involved in the regulation of e-scooters, whether that be Lime or Wave. But outside of that, our ability or the powers we have to do that are limited.
It's also worth saying that very early, it would have been October last year, we had concerns around safety in general relating to this, and we met with Mayor Goff and he shared our concerns. And on behalf of all of us at that time, might have been early November, he wrote to the Minister of Transport about these issues. And the Minister of Transport responded in some detail, but one of the critical issues to know is that the NZTA and or MOT, it might just be NZTA or possibly and or MOT, are looking at the overall aspect of footpath safety and the regulations around that, but that's a longer piece of work.
It's meantime as a supplementary. Is this still a trial period? And if it's a trial period, yes, are you talking to that particular community because they would like to be heard?
Yes, we're trying to talk to a number of people at the moment about it. I'm not sure that we're talking to that group. I need to take that on notice. But we're also looking to undertake a piece of research which is around public opinions, more broadly, to inform how we go forward.
And you see the terms of the trading bylaw could include speed limitation in certain areas, but that wouldn't apply to private users. There could be 100,000 private users if they all elected to purchase e-scooters, and as long as they are following the speed limit and the general rules of the road, they are entitled through the regulations of NZTA to ride both on the road and on the footpath, but not in cycleways.
I hope the appropriate chair of the appropriate committee is listening so that we take the appropriate action and form, well, appropriate letter to the government.
Okay.
And my last question is another one that is in that period, but has come up again recently in the media, and that is the parking on the berms. And during that period, I received the same letter back from you as you obviously sent to Councillor Simpson on the weekend, which hit the media. And that is that you have no obligation to enforce because there's no signage on our berms. What are you doing about that? Because A, the health of our berms is at risk, and the health of our people is at risk who can't get past cars parked there. What are you doing about it? I know what we can do, but what that was a year ago, and so it's the same letter you sent, because I read it and I thought,
So, through you, Mr. Chair. Previously, probably about 18 months ago, we wrote to NZTA and MOT asking for a regulatory change to require no parking on berms. It's fair to say that we received a very lukewarm response to that. It's very low on the legislative program. There had also been a suggestion that a remit through Local Government New Zealand might be an effective mechanism because it's not, we're not alone in this regard, Councillor. It's up and down the country. And it's also quite historic. You know, we had been issuing infringement notices for some time, but yeah. So I think we are following some channels through NZTA and MOT, but council may wish to look at something in terms of a remit through Local Government New Zealand to pick it up on a national scale.
There was a call for remits recently, and I responded by saying yes, private sale and use of fireworks ban, but then there'll also be a ban on parking and berms.
Yeah, this may well be a very good one.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Kia ora, Mr. Chairman. Ka nui te me, kia koutou e tēnei wā. Just a couple of light questions really around the RFT. The underspend 23 million. Do you think that council set the level too high for the capacity of AT to spend it?
The regional fuel tax, I think, only came into force on about the 27th of June. I think the order on council was confirmed. It was always going to take us some time to actually ramp up in terms of our delivery program. This year it's higher than last year. Next year it's intended to be another 150 million more than last year. It wasn't, RFT, I don't think, was ever going to be matched deliberately to the spending profile that's in the capital program. So I would anticipate, member, that will ramp up over time.
So in terms of the underspend on the bus priority improvements in the road corridor, what's behind that?
So it's the program got approved through ATAP and but was again subject to regional fuel tax. We are working through a business case. We've got a program for 11 corridors across Auckland, which is called Connecting Communities. We're looking to get business case and funding from NZTA to get into design and consenting.
And just on this page 51, I think, bottom right-hand corner on Lincoln Road, the commentary there is the project is currently being reviewed to ensure that the original proposal still aligns with other strategic priorities within the region. What's behind that?
Sorry, what? I think there's a desire from some elected members and other stakeholders for us to revisit what the original intent of that project is.
Just unfortunately, I have to apologise to the staff, the council staff in the back. We are going to delay the next item to the next month because we're just losing members, and to be quite honest, we need to, this is not you, Shane, we need to have a better audience to make sure the work that you've done is actually going to be listened to and considered in a more professional manner. So we're not going to do the last item, and therefore anyone who's working for Auckland Council except Auckland Transport can leave if you want to, unless you want to continue to hear Auckland Transport. There's a rush to the door. Anyway, many apologies, sorry. It's was conscious how many staff are in the room, and then we do things like not even turn up. It's not on.
At least I've still got my legion of supporters.
Right, Councillor Hills and Councillor Lee, and then I have a question too. So.
Thank you, Chair. And I'll try and keep it succinct, but I have a few things. But first of all, just I want to say thank you on the ramped up response we're getting on a lot of issues. Sometimes not to my what I want out of the end of it, but actually the response and on buses, on things like yellow lines, on things to address a multitude of things, you know, and people like Randy, Andrew, Marilyn, Dave Nielsen, Helen Griffin, others are just champions and will meet with us at the drop of a hat when there's an issue pop up. So honestly, I'm getting, you know, we're getting, if there's a big issue pop up, we're getting really good service, I feel. Just on that though, I do have a concern, and maybe it's a wider concern, not for here, but around buses and capacity drivers and, you know, what we're going to do in that space, because we do have a lot of issues around school buses. We do have clearly, and maybe it might slightly taper off after March, of flexibility in the system and how we're going to fix that. I know the government's re-looking at PTOM and stuff, but it's not going to come fast enough, and I'm really concerned that we just don't have the wriggle room anymore, and we're going to potentially have more wildcat strikes and different things. What's the action plan around that? Because I think it's a serious issue of attracting drivers and being able to get new buses in the system. And that's around everything that's around school bus routes, which is huge at the moment, and also events. So, and I have discussed it with your staff, but we still rely on, and fair enough, the big event promoters, whoever, to fund public transport. But what I believe is we have to somehow either force them to pay, as it's not an option, or we just have to put on extra, and I know we do a little bit, but we're going to have to start putting on extra buses, because in the end of the day, those people are our responsibility in getting them home. And if there's 500 people standing at Lower Queen Street when one next every 20 minutes comes because a promoter hasn't paid for the extra services. So how do we either compel them to pay, or we're just going to change the model? So that's my first lot of questions around, maybe you want to answer those around drivers, what's the action plan, and events in general, getting people safely home.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thanks for the question. There's a lot of questions in there, and probably with a separate conversation about that. But we share your concerns, and I would say at a strategic level, we seeing the growth that we are seeing, 8.8% in terms of boardings year to date, the numbers that we're seeing, we are very, very concerned that we could be the victims of our success in terms of some of, so that is driving some of the conversations we're looking to have with you at the moment around things like OPEX. We're also very, very conscious of issues that are occurring in Wellington and Tauranga, where there are bus driver shortages. It's seems to be particularly linked to one operator, but I have had discussions with Greg Campbell, CE at Greater Wellington, and Fiona McTavish at Environment Bay of Plenty, and we are keeping a monitoring brief on that. And in some cases, we know that operators shifted a number of drivers out of Auckland to deal with starting up a new contract in Tauranga. That's been resolved since, but there is a broader issue around in a growing city, where are we going to get bus drivers of the future? And Lester and I have talked about that, and Lester has experience that he shared with me in terms of some of the challenges and how they've dealt with in like a DHB environment and things like that may have application in our environment. But the more I'd be happy for our guys to have a conversation with you offline about the detail of how we're responding.
I think the do nothing option is not an option. So we've got some ideas that we're working through that would work to enhance retention and create more attraction of bus drivers into the profession. The capacity issue is a real problem because it's not consistent, the growth, so it's inconsistent across the network. But you know, when I first started here, Len Brown said, we want to double public transport in 10 years. We sought independent advice on that, and that's not something that has happened, and it wasn't properly funded. If things carry on like this, that might actually happen. You know, it was 60 million trips then, it's going to be 100 million trips soon, and at this rate of growth, it could be 120 million trips within 10 years. So that is formidable growth, and these capacity alignment issues are real challenges. And we don't want them to become problems because it can turn people who've made a modal shift off. So yeah, this is top of mind.
Another thing, and it's...
Can I just say one thing about the school buses? Certainly there are problems, but what also tends to happen, there's some buses go unfilled, more or less, and then others are overfull. So, you know, there's some management at the school that would also be able to help about the distribution, because often there's enough buses, they're just not used appropriately, and therefore people could get left behind when there was sufficient capacity.
And another question on, so say Lime scooters as one thing, but maybe not Lime, but scooters in general. We've missed the boat, they're here, whether we give another trading license or not. There's definitely more private scooters now than Lime, so actually the conversation has moved on. How can we quickly, you know, potentially cheaply, what are the barriers to put in more separated cycleways around at least the centre of the city? You know, even just looking at Keith Street, just having that fence and those cones up. I know it's because there's construction on, but we could, and I know it's ugly and it's not nice, but actually, if there is other things that come across about not riding on the footpath and so on, what do we need to do? Because I use the scooters to get to you guys. You know, if I've got to get down the road, but I use the Nelson Street. The other day with Port, I used Nelson Street and Quay. But if I have to go anywhere else, I find it too scary to go on the road. And obviously pedestrians don't appreciate potentially, although I'm respectful, other people might not be. But the conversation's moved on. So what do we need to do to ramp that up? Because it's exploding. We will get more than double. Look at cycling numbers last month. You know, next summer we're going to be like that. So, so that's how we can do things cheap and easy. If money's in.
Yeah, so through you again, Chair. I think there may be some options around tactical urbanism, I think, on a short-term basis, but if we are to move forward and we can do it in a safe way with e-scooters, then clearly using more cycleways, and I think the Minister has stated that might be an appropriate place for them. Then if they are to continue, I do quite like the concept of e-scooter operators contributing to cycleways, and maybe that's something that could be reflected in future licence fees. But even if we do that, you'll be aware of some of the challenges we've had in delivering cycleways. It's not just a cycling program; it is an urban placemaking program. That's what communities want. If we don't do it in that way, we often lose the social licence to deliver the cycling program or the corridors. So there will be, you know, apart from short-term tactical urbanism, there's a money or a funding issue to solve, and there's a timing or delivery issue, which and we've had those challenges and we're trying to work through.
I'll just make a note, or to note, Chair, the comment Richard made about cycling. So cycling numbers have seriously taken off. They are way ahead of where they've been before. And this is, of course, what we predicted. And this will continue and amplify as we get more cycleways in, and particularly as we get more connections in. But for the skeptics, it's be quite important that they have a thorough look at the latest figures, because those figures aren't going backwards, that's for sure.
One last comment, and it's not financial, just around what are we...
It's got too many mics on.
What can we do? And I know you're doing a bunch of positive things already and have been, but you know, my discussions with you over racism on the public transport network over time, racism towards bus drivers or from bus drivers to passengers, different things, and then with obviously the tragic events of last week, how we can strengthen making sure people are welcome on our transport network, because it's how people get across every day. So what are you doing for your own staff, the contractors, or do you have a plan to increase some sort of more promotion about zero tolerance? I know you've already done the work of the last few years, but clearly there's a strength. And the last question, which is kind of packed into that, I've had a few questions about Friday's vigil. Obviously, it's potentially too short to... Okay, so like maybe more carriages to the Parnell station on Friday afternoon, if possible, or whatever, but I know it's short term in the domain there.
I'm just going to jump ahead in the order and ask a couple of follow-up questions to what Councillor Hills. We've got the issue, as you say, bus driver shortage and above that potential industrial action. With the lifting of the minimum wage across the board, that's not going to actually solve anything, would be the way I would see it, because everyone's going to just rise. So you're going to get the same issue there. It probably would be useful for you guys to do some work on whether the rise to the living wage would have an impact. Because as you know, we've done that within the council body, but the next step quite clearly is, do you extend it to all contractors? Now, there's got a huge cost effect there and then a flow on to fares or whatever, but that may have an effect on recruitment. The unions would tell you that. So I'm not asking for an answer on that. That's just to be reflected on at the time. And then the second one is, you know, we had the Newton School issue, you know, with just pulling their walking train off effectively a shared path, not a cycleway. So, and I know, Lester, you get a lot of calls about cycle lanes, and I and a few others have just consistently said you perhaps need to be looking at more shared paths. Now, Lime Scooters adding to the cyclist and walkers, etc., and everyone else. And I know, Shane, you followed Wayne's advice and my advice to go to New Plymouth. So you saw what a 3 metre wide path can do, which there's just more room to share. So to be, you know, more cycleways, which are narrower, yeah, they'll take scooters and that as well. But there's a huge uplift in people walking, pushing, prams, taking the dog and going along. I see Wally often down Titirangi Road. But there's just a huge uplift in people just showing more activity. I mean, how much consideration, and it's always a cost thing, but are you giving to more shared pathways which are wider and safer as compared to cycleways?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, the points you raise are extremely valid, and just coming back quickly to the Northwestern Cycleway issue at Newton School. I attended one of our events and I had a look myself, the sheer number of children and adults walking through there. The thing about the Northwestern Cycleway, we're finding that with a lot of our shared paths is, as Dr. Levy mentioned, our cycling numbers are growing. So a lot of these paths are slowly becoming victims of their own success in many ways. And that's a classic issue we have with the Northwestern. You know, we have lots of cyclists that have been using it. We've got more pedestrians that are wanting to use and walk around. So we are looking at that particular one. We are looking at some way to get around that, some physical changes to the pathway. It might take a bit of time, but we're working through that. In the interim, we're doing some some events and activation and education around sharing the parts. Look wider across the region. We do have some standards around the width of our shared parts, absolutely, but we are also looking at, are they fit for purpose as the numbers do grow, because there's increasing friction between pedestrians and cyclists on these shared parts as well. But you're quite right. It's balancing the price tag as well with that as well. But at the end of the day, we want to look at infrastructure as actually catering for our most vulnerable users in a safe way as well.
Realistically, probably going to come down to both and, over time.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I just pick up your comment around minimum wage, we have done some work on that following, I think it was the last meeting we raised a similar issue. Most, if not all, of our contractors already pay minimum wage, so there's a little expectation that'll impact on tender prices, for example. Living wage, sorry, not minimum wage, living wage.
Most are paying the living wage.
Yes.
Okay.
So there's not a huge expectation that will impact on tender prices and therefore increases, for example.
And that's interesting to hear that. Thank you.
Just, Mr. Chair, the idea Shane and I are throwing around is different to this. And once it's shaped up, we'll obviously want to share it, because there will be costs associated with it. But my belief and Shane's is that the benefits will outweigh the costs.
And what are you talking about, split shifts? Or, come back to us. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, and thank you, gentlemen. Could I just take you up on the comment in regard to Pukekohe electrification? That was promised by a previous government. The previous minister, Dr. Cullen, in fact, said the government would look at Pukekohe again in 2013. So there's been a lot of water under the bridge. I understand that there isn't much progress there. What can this council do politically to bring some focus on this matter? Why should the people of Pukekohe and Franklin be treated as second class? So can we help you here?
Absolutely. You can, through you, Chair. Any support you can give in terms of voicing your concerns in terms of the business casing and funding process, in terms of voicing about some of the blockages that we're having with any of your political colleagues in Wellington would be appreciated.
I think it needs to be coordinated, so maybe Wally and Lester can talk to the mayor, and it's not like the old days where you would honcho up the mayors and we'd all go to Wellington, put pressure on. At our last meeting, we discussed OPEX. I questioned some figures and asked that figures be communicated in a consistent way. And I want to go back to my old friend, the board transport monthly indicators, because looking at year ending December 2018, it doesn't look bad in here, to be honest. And I would be advancing warm congratulations on a 5.2% overall increase in PT. But when I look into the board report and look at the normalised figures, they're different figures altogether, aren't they? And not nearly as rosy. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but 1.5% is somewhat different to 5.2%. And to be honest with you, even that 0.2% is not what the December figures indicate. They indicate 5% unnormalised and 1.5% normalised. And you know, it's the normalised data we act on, because that's how you that's how you compare. And comparability is what we need to see if we're getting progress. So I make a request that we be consistent and candid about data when it comes to these sorts of meetings, because this is measuring, our job is to measure your performance as against the long-term plan. And we won't be doing our job if we're not scrutinising these figures closely. So I make a request again for consistency and transparency in the figures that you give to the governing body.
Okay, Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation. I just wanted to ask, because I still get hassled about voting for the regional fuel tax. So I think we really do need to be better at telling the story about what we're getting out of the regional fuel tax. So is there a way where these figures can actually be broken down into what came out of the regional fuel tax? Because it's got 251 million, I think, here, but it's only been 6 months and we've collected 78 million. So is there a way to, differentiate? Please.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor. So we have, as Shane said, I think in response to Member Taipari, a lot of the expenditure to this point has been in business casing and not hard delivery of on-the-ground projects. That's not too far away. But in preparation for that, we have a series of logos or icons made up, so branding, if you like, around the regional fuel tax. So on all projects that are either fully or partially regional fuel tax funded, they'll be branded as such. Also just standard commentary in all media releases, for example, where projects are regional fuel tax funded. So we certainly are trying to give some visibility to those projects that are funded in that way.
Okay, that's cool. That's cool. Can I ask one more question? I think it's really good, the progress that you're making with local boards. But I do want to know, what can we do to have good progress with councillors in Auckland Transport? Because I'm not the only one that groans and gripes about Auckland Transport around this table. So what can we do in that regard?
Well, we have our councillor Auckland Transport Board workshops. The attendance is variable and the attention is variable when there is attendance. We have these meetings where the attendance and attention can be variable. Sorry? Attention.
And are not attending to what you're saying. I'm being serious. Is that what you said?
Yes. There's people on phones, people going out, this is to me a sign that people aren't attentive.
Thank you for
Not
that.
everybody.
Kathy, that does not apply to you. So
No, but thank you for that observation.
Yeah.
You're in a room with not even a quorum at a council meeting, to be
Yeah,
honest.
well, we constantly have people raising these issues about, so we open to share their information for people to understand. Look, Auckland Transport's a highly complex organisation for which there are a number of people who passionately hold opinions that are often not based in fact. And so we are happy at any time to provide the facts, not the opinions, and the evidence, but that's quite a difficult gradient for us. So we have any opportunity to do that, we will do that.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, one other initiative which I should have touched on, it was with regards to local boards, but that we are working on with Phil Wilson and his team is a councillor clinic, which we will host or hold at Albert Street once a week, where we will have senior managers available for councillors to drop in and raise effectively your issues of the week. We're talking operational issues, things like that, such as Councillor Stewart raised around yellow lines or whatever. And that the undertaking is that we will deal with those that week to try and sort of circumvent the requests that you often have going into the mincing machine, if you like. So working with, as I say, with Phil Wilson and his team on that now, and we hopefully will have that set up within the next couple of weeks.
That sounds really good, because my requests are treated as OIAs, and then I have to wait 21 days to get a response. Surely that can't be the way that we're going to work together better. So yeah, that would be much appreciated, because the majority of the complaints in my inbox are Auckland Transport. So thank you.
Yeah, just to make a couple of comments on the discussion we've had so far. We are trying to think of ways of working more effectively with councillors, just putting the boards to one side, because we've got some really big programs of work coming, and Shane's mentioned the 11 bus priorities, and we're now assembling those in terms of an end-to-end integrated corridors, because they'll go through a number of wards. They will end up urban redevelopment projects. The transport funds can only go so far. To deliver community outcomes, will need funding outside of what NZTA will be looking at. There will be really important trade-offs to make between local amenity and strategic purpose. And I think we're out of that program. We will be looking for a new way of engaging, because at the moment, because of limits of funding, we've tended to do bit by bit. So within Auckland Transport, it feels like we're fighting tooth and nail for each car park that gets shifted. And what the community is not seeing is the end outcome delivered at some pace, because actually it doesn't work. You don't get the wider community benefits until the whole thing's finished. But what people are seeing is the loss of something they've had in the short bit of, stage by stage. So that's a whole program which I think we are certainly looking to engage with councillors differently to get the right debate and discussion going. The other area which we've talked about here today is on networks, and scooters and other things are going to come along and all the rest of it. We've got to really raise the question, is it actually sensible, even desirable, to deal with that by creating new networks all the time? It may not be possible. We know safety is an issue. Those alternative devices are not a problem on a 30k road. So one formula is to go to the road user for money to separate modes. In livable cities, that's quite brutal infrastructure, and it probably won't work for livable, high density communities. So the option of road users helping to pay for it by travelling more slowly, I think, has to be looked at as an integrated part of it. Again, that's about a whole lot of decision making, in discussions with communities. It's probably a little bit different than what we're having at the moment. Because of the way the rule's written, Auckland Transport has had to go and consult on a speed management bylaw. It's very difficult in that context to actually talk about the wider issue of different users being able to use the infrastructure we already have in place safely by one side of it travelling less fast. That's really what the discussion's about, particularly in the urban areas. So I actually think there are some really great opportunities for the governing body and the Auckland Transport Board to talk about some of these transforming things that have got to having to happen in our city in a more integrated way. So that's my thought.
So I just support that.
Thank you,
With something, Mr. Chair, what Wayne had said about, we are moving towards an enterprise or program approach rather than a project approach. So we can go much more quickly. But that does require support. And I guess the speed management program is one such issue where we could work together. After all, the planning committee unanimously supported it and asked us to accelerate it. But can we turn to the councillors for strong endorsement and vocal support? We will see. But that's what we are looking for. And I think this is what causes the problems, is that decisions are made and then, They're not fully supported and makes our life extremely difficult. But we're open to do business differently. But we need everyone to think differently, and we also need to realise that Auckland Transport does have priorities, and we can't make everything our priority, otherwise we have no priority. And we have got very clear priorities about safety, modal shift, and that's where we have to put our energy and our resources. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, I know that fairly well. I often feel as though people were saying, oh no, we're right behind you. And I say, well, who's in front? Councillor Newman.
I do hope that any comments about my attention will be expressed directly to me, and I will be named.
We noticed your very clear attention.
So what I want to do is I want to delve into a number of matters that I've been reflecting upon in the last few weeks. And firstly, what I wanted to understand is Auckland Transport's commitment as a strategic priority to the road network maintenance and the allocation of funding to ensure that we do achieve good maintenance across the network. When I have a look at the maintenance and operations and the renewals funding, Auckland Transport's allocation isn't even. The south has 2,642 kilometres of road, the north has 6,261 kilometres of road. Over a 6-year period, funding for renewals in the south has gone from 31.5 million to 29.4 million. Over that same period, renewals in the north went from 31 million to 46 million. If you have a look at the funding for maintenance and operations in the south, it went from 7 million to 5.6 million. In the north, it went from nearly 10 million to 11.2 million. So what I want to understand is the work that's taking place within Auckland Transport as we complete the analysis of the funding requirements for that network to address that kind of disparity, understanding the scale of pressure from those big aggregate trucks in the south that are rumbling across the local road network, the fact that there are commuters in the south who don't have alternative PT modes, and that they have to travel an awful long way to work. So could you start with that, because I've got a couple of other questions.
Thank you, Councillor. Alan Wallace, obviously we know each other. What I can say is the allocation of funding between areas is done on a needs basis, and particularly in respect to the renewal funding, that depends on the projects that are in each year's annual program. So that does move around a bit. I take your point as to what appears to be a lower level of spend in the south in recent times. I do agree with you that I think going forward, the impact of the fact that we have a lot of quarry trucks, we have a lot of roads in the south, rural area in particular, which are carrying up to 1,000 trucks a day. They're very heavily trafficked. The impact of that will attract a lot more funding to those corridors in the future. And that's something I've made our asset manager very aware of. If I put my mind back 5 to 10 years ago, I'd say the condition of a lot of that part of the network was much better relative terms than other parts of the network, and that's why it hasn't attracted funding in recent times. But its time is coming. As I say, we've got about 150 k's of roads down there that are carrying 1,000 trucks a day, which is more than most state highways in the country. And we need to spend more money on strengthening those roads. So, point taken, I think you will see some correction in that going forward.
I think when you talk about the time is coming, I think that you will be aware, and I'm certainly aware, that the contract needs to be considered now, because that's an old contract that's about to be updated. So are we landing ourselves in a place where there is work to look at both the maintenance and operations, but particularly the renewals, in light of the performance of that network, and noting that I have got correspondence from Auckland Transport that indicates that it accepts that there is pressure as a result of growth, but you haven't actually fully understood the pressure of growth on the network. So this is pretty urgent stuff.
Yeah, certainly that understanding the impact on those low volume roads on the city fringes, which are now being, as development moves out, there certainly is a funding requirement in there which hasn't been properly recognised in the past. But I think the point you're making about the new contracts is when we go to market again, we do expect the world's quite different now to 8 or 9 years ago when this work was tendered in the south. The rates that we get will reflect that. The other point I'd make is that there needs to be a genuine funding commitment for the term of the contracts to make sure that we can deliver value for money. If there's a lack of certainty about confidence about funding levels, then that's quite undesirable. So that's something we've identified in terms of going forward, that we need to have that confidence that the funding levels match the needs of the network and will be there for the full term of the contract.
If you don't get a sympathetic hearing from NZTA around the FAR rate, then what happens then?
Our view of NZTA, I think we have a great opportunity in putting evidence in front of them that will support a higher level of funding for road maintenance renewals going forward, but we have a bit of work to do there to build a case, and bear in mind that the amount of funding they have available in this 3-year period is capped, but I think the onus is on us to put quality information in front of them to support a higher level of funding for road maintenance renewals.
Okay, let's have a go at cycleways. So in the first half... Yep.
I mean, and we have to put a strong case, because the reality is that if you have existing assets, your priority should be to maintain those assets before investing into new assets. So, you know, that case has to be made, because otherwise the discussion has to shift to rebalance between existing assets and new assets, and that's very difficult territory. So that is well understood. I just want to make the point that has been made. So we don't maintain on the length of the network, but we maintain on the conditions of the network, and the work around that, because we have had a look at that just very recently, is becoming a lot more sophisticated around determining the conditions and much more dynamic.
And Auckland Transport, we're aware that I'm very interested in that in terms of the performance of my network in the south, given the usage of it.
And you're interested in that in terms of the performance of the whole network?
And I am too. Turning to cycleways, I'm a little bit concerned about, look, in the south, in the first half decade of ATAP, I don't think there's any money for new cycleway investment in the south. I'm concerned about the idea that the way to ensure that we get improve utility to address safety to improve utility around the cycleways is to address it through lower traffic speeds, which is, I can see the idea around that, but I can also see the problem remaining if we don't have proper grade separation. I see cycleways that exist on heavy arterial roads in the south where there is nothing to separate someone travelling on a bike from that great big truck trailer that's roaring by just a few feet away. I mean, for the purpose of retaining or increasing the volume, the length of cycleways across the entire network, are some of these cycleways worth retaining, or in fact, when it isn't appropriate to reduce speed in certain locations, and we do have cycleways that is just paint on a road without proper separation, that actually we need to make a hard decision and say, you know what, great idea, but unsafe, not fit for purpose under the circumstance, because cyclists make a judgment around their safety and they don't use it.
Yes, is a simple answer. The fundamental work that's been done on the program business case for cycling is that cyclists want the predominant thing they want is a safe and connected network. And I think when the original Urban Cycleways program was developed in a very, very short space of time in 2013. It was done in an enormous... I think the team would acknowledge that what we thought was suitable at that time is no longer suitable now. And we have projects, and I'll give you one, for example, which is not in the south, but goes to your point, where it crosses a railway line. We are going to have to grade separate the cycleway from the railway line, and that is adding cost to that project. But it is, to your point, that is exactly right. We are going to have to do that, and just painting green paint on the road is not going to be suffice.
I do hope that you don't think I'm just perpetually angry, because I'm not. But I did want to ask about, and I actually wonder with respect to local boards, if they're being realistic about your ability to deliver projects, because it seems to me, I'm doing a stock take of some of them in my neck of the woods, and there just seems to be an endless supply of projects that you can't deliver. Often projects that are contingent on third-party funding, I worry about the Mayor's ability to deliver his build it budget because it's contingent on NZTA funding. What constraint does your internal staffing have on your ability to get some of these local projects over the line? Because I just wonder if some of them are just not able to be delivered simply because you don't have anyone to do it.
Well, maybe I can make a start on that.
Why don't I start?
Okay, you start.
Through you, Chair. First of all, I know you're not always angry because I've met you out at Takanini Station at 6 o'clock in the morning. It's not unique to local board projects. It is about all our program in terms of having the capability and capacity to deliver, and that is everything through internal resource to how we procure, to consenting, all of that. Doing more of the same is just not going to deliver the program. So a lot of what we've been focusing on the back half of last year was how do we get the right place and the right capacity and capability in the organisation. As I said previously, regional fuel tax only became live on about the 27th of June, I think, the order on council. It's not something you can flick a switch. It's like a jumbo jet, as somebody else said to me to my left. It's like preparing a jumbo jet to take off. Wally, did you want?
I'd only add through you, Mr. Chair, that for the Transport Capital Fund, for example, Councillor, we need to streamline the number of projects or ideas that come through local boards, and my team tries to do that. So I think at the moment we've got 70 projects that various local boards have thrown up for us to do a rough order of costs on. So we need to work more closely with local boards and remind them of their own priorities through their local board plans, and really filter those projects much earlier than perhaps we've been doing. The other issue is in terms of timing of budgets. So come July 1 this year, local board Transport Capital Fund will get another injection of $20 million, and a number of boards, as you're aware, haven't actually decided how they're going to spend this year's allocation. That, given the elections are in October, none of that will get considered. Our local boards won't be sworn in and get their feet under the table till February. We probably won't get in front of them till March or April to get a sense of how they want to spend that fund. So, you know, there's always going to be a backlog of transport capital funding in terms of the timing that the budget flows through.
That's all from me. Thank you very much for the excellent work that's taking place to build the park and ride at the Takanini train station. Very, very exciting $4.4 million project. Thank you for the footpath at Pararikau Road, and thank you in anticipation of the reconstruction of Pararikau Road, which will happen, I'm no doubt, this financial year.
I think we need to get Councillor Newman's speaker checked. We have We have Councillor Lee and then Councillor Stewart. Wrap it up.
Mr. Chairman, I was going to respond to Lester's comment, but I think I had some other questions as well, but I think we've spent quite a lot of time and we'll have a further discussion later on, so thank you.
Okay, I just want to actually thank Shane. If you remember, on the 23rd of December, we had the sports sticker carvings all over the footpaths in Howick, and the lady that was really concerned about it, I said it might not be until the beginning of the year. We might not be able to sort it out. And on Christmas Eve, I got a phone call from the lady and she said, thank you very much. Fulton Hogan have just been around and they've taken it. So I want to really thank you for that. And I want to also just thank you whenever I have reached out, and usually it's something that I believe is really something really important, and I think the sports stickers was important. Was really important for that lady anyway, and the fence thing is really important. But one of the things that I'm just want to touch base on the 15th of April, I believe that's when the busway and the T2s are going to come down Pekaringa Road. Both Councillor Young and I have at 6:30 in the morning and 7 o'clock in the mornings, we've actually been out there doing video footage of vehicles that are travelling up from Howick through Pekaringa onto the highway, and most of the people that are travelling at that time of the morning are T2s, and even when you get off Pekaringa Road and you get onto the Pekaringa Highway, before you go onto the motorway, most people aren't going, a lot of people are going on the motorway, but a lot of people are also going to Onehunga, Mangere, Avondale, and they're all T1s. In fact, very few T2s at that time of the morning, at 6:30 in the morning. I quite often leave home around about 6:30 in the morning to come into the city, and at that time of the morning, it's mainly T1s. So we're all a little bit concerned about bottlenecks and things that are happening. So if this on the 15th of April, the bus lanes and the T2 thing becomes a real nightmare for the people in our community, could we look at going back to what we have until later on, until the Reeves Road flyover goes? You know, let's try it. But my gut feeling is that people, not everybody's going to T2. We're a little bit different to the North Shore, and we're a little bit different from out west.
No,
we are. And no, out west, it's really, I've got family live out that way, as you know. And
I know you do.
No, so it is a little bit different out our neck of the woods, and I'm not just trying to say we're special. It's just it's genuine. Most people are T1ing into the city or wherever they're going, because that's just how it is. Because they're not all coming to the CBD.
And your response.
So
I'll actually hand over to Randy, Councillor, because he's far more reasonable about these things than I would be if we're trying to accelerate mode shift.
To you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Look, you will be aware we've done quite a lot of work in terms of what is the right mix for that road. That is a measure that we're putting in place to manage the significant congestion we're expecting as we kick off the big construction works for the Amity project. So whilst I guess all of our assessments are saying whilst there is a lot of T1s potentially now, we want to actually watch and see how that changes, because the idea is to actually encourage more people to carpool, car share, because you're not going to be able to travel I guess as you currently are through the construction works. So the idea is to actually try and encourage that mode shift.
Anyway, so the only other issue that we have is that a lot of people that live in Howick, Pekaringa, Pine Harbour, because they all come up Pekaringa Road, a lot of them, just to get to Onehunga, you may have to catch 3, maybe even 4 modes of transport. To get to Mangere, to the airport, you have to catch 2 or 3, no, at least 3, maybe 4 modes of transport, and then you might have, after you get dropped off from the bus, you might have another 15-minute to 20-minute walk from the bus stop to wherever you're working. So it's you know, so.
Councillor Stewart, what you've done is you've fired up 2 more people with questions now to
I
follow
know.
up on you. So
No,
we're happy to move on.
but it is. This is something that's coming to us, and it's coming really fast, and have to be concerned. You know, so you just imagine. How would you know? You have to put yourself into other people's shoes.
Thank you, Wayne.
We'll monitor it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
I'm going to go to Councillor Bartley and then Councillor Hills. That's it today.
Mr. Chair, I thought you wanted us to set aside the whole day, but never mind. My question, because everyone else is asking about their local areas, I have to ask, are we reviewing the bus route changes yet? Because I still have the same people raising their concerns about losing their bus service in Onehunga, One Tree Hill.
So through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor Bartley, you'll get a letter yourself, Priyanka and Councillor Lee about the 312 petition. I just saw a draft this morning. Patronage on those routes is up 11%. So despite what some of the petitioners have said, it seems to be working for a lot more people. We had, as you may recall, just before Christmas, written to both yourself and Priyanka asking if there was any specific examples of issues that people were facing. So you'll be getting a letter in the next day or two just outlining what the situation now is now that the bus changes are bedded in, and re-inviting you to come back with any specific examples. So.
Oh, cool. Can you just use the emails that I sent to Shane? Because then I'll have to re-forward all those emails again.
Okay, thank you.
They had specific details of the issues.
Councillor Hills.
Mine was a little bit of what Councillor Bartley said around just one route, but we're meeting on that again this week. The last question, I think Councillor Clow sort of interrupted, just of any extra things or measures you're doing for staff contractors on not tolerating racism both ways. Just, is there anything you're looking at to further increase the good work that has been doing for many years, but I think we definitely need to do better.
For the last few days, we've obviously we've been standing up our crisis management team. At the moment, the focus has been on helping our staff, who we have a significant Muslim population in our organisation. We've been very particularly concerned about them and the safety of people around the network. We will move to look at what we need to do beyond this once we get through this phase.
Yes. Thank you, Wally, Lester, Shane and team, and thank you for coming, and sorry we are running late today.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors.
Apologies for the lack of attendance.
You have very good attendance, Councillor Casey.